Hello and welcome to episode 48 of Enterprising Minds. We are quickly approaching the 50 mark, guys. Not sure if you're aware of that, but how does that feel?
Crazy.
Pretty darn good. Nice work, team.
Yeah.
So with that, actually, we are going to address a concern that a couple of us have had in the workplace, under the format of coffee talk style advice. So, Ruthi, you have the question formulated. So why don't you introduce the topic and we'll get everything rolling.
All right, let's get started. So since 2020, I think it's fair to say most of us have encountered this. If you're working in the corporate marketing world, a lot more of our work is remote. Mm-hmm. Whether it's hybrid, full-time remote, the shift is definitely away from being in office with your team every single day and more towards being on calls, using more chat-based functionality to communicate and collaborate with your team. So the thing I've been thinking about a lot more is, as a new team member, or indeed as an established team member, how can we improve the way that we onboard and engage entry-level employees so that they feel more part of the team, and importantly, can get that sort of learning by osmosis that happens so easily when you're side by side. And I think about this from two angles. From the one side, what advice might we give to an entry-level applicant, or maybe somebody who falls in that 1 to 3 years of experience? You're joining a new company with its own culture, with its own team. How do you embrace or jump into it in such a way that you get exposure to lots of people, lots of ways of doing things, and can really start learning the things that you don't even know to ask about, or you don't even know that you need training on. And then the other dimension is, as either an established team member who has new team members they're working with, or as a manager of a team, how do we think about creating the space for those new entry-level employees coming in, making them certainly feel welcome, so there's sort of a cultural aspect to it, but then also giving them the push or the opportunities or the suggestions they need to really get a head start in working with a new team in a new way. And I'll just add one more piece on this, which is I'm thinking particularly that entry-level employee and the folks coming out of college or out of high school in particular. And the reason I think about that is because their entire history has been very much one of an educational setting, which, as we all know, is quite distinct from a corporate setting or a business setting. Oftentimes, you don't have a syllabus that says, here's the steps you need to take. Sometimes you're given a project and you have to ad-lib it. Sometimes you get very specific onboarding that sort of steps you through one by one. Sometimes you don't get that level of hand-holding, and so what can you do to set yourself up for success, and what can team members and managers do to better set those teams up for success?
Mm-hmm. Is there a specific situation that you're talking about, like people are returning to work and now have to be shoulder to shoulder, or just sort of general advice for new?
You've got a new team member who's maybe had a couple of internships, mm-hmm. or maybe not even that. They're joining your team. They don't know what they don't know. They've never worked in a corporate setting before. Maybe they've had minimal experience. How do you ensure those guys get the type of learning you get, even just by the water cooler chat, from the other more experienced team members? They're not only learning the skills of the trade, the job trade, but they're also learning, how do you be a good corporate employee? How do you work with other people effectively within that setting? There's so much that you get by just simply being, or used to get by simply being in person in an office. That's a gap now. And some of the things that come to mind is, okay, well, one way you could solve this would be to encourage your teams to just go in office more often, to have more side-by-side time, because you get those sort of side chats, or you get the sort of, oh, I'm watching them do stuff. Another thought could be, oh, okay, well, maybe we do sort of an apprentice model where you have them follow other team members, and you set the expectation that, hey, you're going to follow this team member. You're going to go to meetings with them. You're going to be on emails. You're going to see how they communicate and how they work with other parts of the organization. Those are just a couple of thoughts off the top of my head to give the type of exposure to some of the non-tangible items that wouldn't be part of an onboarding checklist. Or maybe there's a way you structure your onboarding checklist to enable that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot because you have like what I would consider one of the more traditional backgrounds of the three of us in terms of like school to corporate.
Yeah,
so
I got a whole laundry list of stuff.
Yeah, so let's start with you, and then we can go to me, which is totally I don't know how I ended up here kind of story.
I know. I've also had this experience a few times. Worked for a few very remote companies. Also had direct reports who were kind of pretty new in the industry, but also remote and trying to shift into a very different style of work. Had some people who like came from like the online gambling world and then shifted into a very, conservative corporate world. Like there's culture shifts like that as well for whatever experiences they may have had. Might be run very, very differently, and the abilities that they had there might be very different than what they have here. Case in point, I had a direct report who was like, man, we really need, if we want to make this blog, get more attention, we need to put a link right here on the homepage. And giant multinational corporation, do you know what it takes to put a button on the homepage? Like months of work. Like you got to get some UX studies that are going to prove that's going to be a value. I mean, it's like there's a mountain of work, and he was used to having full control of the site and literally just being able to think of an idea, throw it on the site, it's done by lunch. So it's setting expectations there, kind of like level setting with that and kind of moving up. With that particular example, actually, it's a good one for this conversation. I let him run with it, knowing that we're not going to be able to make this happen, but this is a small task. Run with this. Let's learn about what it's going to take to actually do this. Let's meet with people. We'll talk to them. We'll run through this entire thing like it's, we're 100% behind it. And we'll learn through it, basically, like who has to be involved, what the discussions, all the rest. And I gave him basically real world experience on something he was excited about. And I was alongside with him, feeding alongside, saying like, look, it's extremely difficult to do, but this is how we would do it. So let's start this. It's going to be a 10% project. It's not going to be your main job, but I want to pull you through this process too. And I explained that to him right at the beginning, like not trying to like think that this is some kind of confidence scheme or something like that where you goes through something for no point. But no, I explained that to him so that he had that ability and start seeing that perspective from the inside of like, this is the difference in what happens. Quite a few other things from a remote side as well, especially speaking to anybody younger generations. What is said and how it's said in chat is not how people are in person. Chat is not people. I say this many times because I've had some very interesting managers who would do the ellipses, the three little dots at the end of like random statements. And it would make people so nervous because it was like, yeah, we should get that done, ... And they're like, well, what am I supposed to take from that? Or is this something we're supposed to do? Is this not something? It's like what? And then like use of emojis. Oh my gosh. There are generational differences on the definitions of emojis and they are highly confused. So whenever someone is speaking via chat, I always try to take it with the very smallest grain of, very largest grain of salt and basically try to just imagine that what they're saying in person will be considerably different than how they are in chat. So to that point, be the person who's always on camera as much as possible. If you have a quick discussion with someone and it's getting a little confusing, book some time with them or saying, hey, are you free the next like 10, 15 minutes? Can we just talk this out? the moment you can get on camera and start to talk with people, they understand you and where you're coming from. They have additional empathy, you on the other side as well. And then you can start to, there's so much more communication that happens with facial structure, facial motions and hands and all the rest of that you're missing.
I think along those lines, if I can jump in, one of the things that has allowed me to be successful, I had a manager when I took a new job within a company who on day one gave me a spreadsheet and said, here are all the people that you need to know in order to do your job well. And that was super helpful because then he called it the hit list. He's like, I expect you to have coffee with every single one of these people within your first month and know what they're working on, figure out who you vibe with, and, go from there. And so at all of our one-on-ones was, hey, how's that hit list coming? And that was really good because then I could remember who was working on what project. And then whenever I was in a random conversation, somebody was like, oh, I'm thinking of doing this. I'm like, oh, so-and-so is already doing that. Well, let me put you in touch, and then being able to facilitate those connections has allowed me to be much more successful than if I was only trying to do it by myself. And that actually came up today. I was talking to a colleague in Europe and he's like, how do you have access to all these different tools that, you might not even supposed to be allowed to have access to because you're not on that team anymore? I was like, it's because I have relationships. People want me to have the tool because they know I know how to use it properly, and I'm willing to help. So it's easier for me to, if they ask me a question, it's easier for me to jump in and use that tool and give the data and my perspective on what should happen or a way to approach something than, if they have to share their screen and I say, okay, click here. No, move down to that, do that, So, the relationship piece is extremely important. And that's the one thing, in all of our other discussions that we've had, that's the one thing AI can't do. It can write your emails for you, but creating an actual connection, that's on you to do. So
I'm going to add a couple of those too, and then I'll pass it back to Alex because some of the ones you've added so far, Alex, have been super helpful. And I've been taking notes on the side because some of these are like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, or that's a good reminder. The coffee chat one in particular, man, it's because you don't know who you don't know. And what that does, Dave, is it gives the person permission to just reach out. Yep. Oh, my boss said I had to go have a coffee chat. Like all of a sudden it takes a hurdle away that says, yeah, I can reach out to this person, even though they might be a different level or they're on a different team. The two other thoughts that came to mind. One is I remember a job I started and somebody, one of the team members had created a shareable bookmark list of here's all the tools and random links from the company that you need to have access to for just random corporate life. Not even just to do your job, but just, hey, here's how you find Workday. Here's how you find your benefits information. Here's that annoying company SharePoint link that no one can ever find. It's all of those little things that you don't even know to ask for. You don't know that they exist because they're sort of part of the suite of company resources. And then related, I have done this for team members in the past too, is giving them, here's the list of tools you're going to need. Go start asking or make sure you have access or I'll help you along as you go, which is huge. The other thought that came to mind as you were talking about that sort of personal relationship thing, I think one of the most valuable thing you can do as a new person, especially as you're entering the job market for the first time, play that new card. Say, hey, I'm new. I don't know what I don't know. You said something interesting in this meeting. I would love to learn more about that. You've got a grace period of at least a year, especially when you're a new entry, right? 6 months for sure, but at least a year to say, hey, we've never met before, but I'd love to learn more about this. Informational interviews. If you start out with saying, hey, I just joined, I'd love to learn more about this in your area, people love to talk about what they do. They love to, and they like to help. And so play that new card and set up as many informational interviews as you can, along with the coffee chats of hey, let's just get to know each other.
Right. So a funny story along those lines, Ruthi. That new card, when I first joined, the really large Fortune 100, I leveraged that new card, and there was a senior vice president who was like way up the chain, who presented on careers in blah 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 blah. Right? It was like a little 10-minute spiel. So I went ahead and emailed him and said, "Hey, I saw that you saw your presentation on this. Would love to pick your brain on what you've experienced through your thing and how I can apply that as a new hire to this organization." I fully expected a no, because right, it's like, here's the new guy batting for the All-Star or whatever, and to my surprise, he's like, "You can have 15 minutes at 7:30 in the morning on this day." It's like, in his commute to the airplane or something. And it was great. He was really nice. He told me, yeah, I've got 20 years experience. This is how it works. This is how you want to do it. And, but things change a lot, but, go for it and welcome to the company. I was like, that's pretty sweet. Like, don't be afraid to swing for the fences, because most people are willing to help. And that's been something that's taken me too long in my career to figure out. Yeah.
Most people are people.
Typically.
They'll be helpful. Yeah.
So, Alex, you were going to say something before I jumped in with the story?
Oh, I was just saying from the manager perspective. So there's we're playing both sides of this. The other piece about the intro and the coffees, that can make a lot of people really nervous to just, you brand new to a company, you know nothing. Your imposter syndrome is like 110%. It's tough. As a manager or even as a colleague to someone, I think the nicest things to do is to pull them along into an intro meeting to other people, cameras on if you can, and softball out a couple of personal questions to everybody. Pets, friends, what do people like to do? That kind of stuff. If it's intro slides and that's the kind of thing that you guys do, fine. The whole other team presents first, though. Then you talk to the person who's the newbie. The more personal connections and basically breakdown of being, this is a title and this is me, and instead this is a person and I'm a person, the closer you can get to that person-to-person piece, the more comfortable people are. And I've noticed that at the last couple of companies that I joined, I was freaking awkward until there was finally like a breakdown meeting, like might have been the first week, where everybody was relaxed and chill on a Friday and we were just talking. And then suddenly my nervousness and all the rest just plummeted, and I was able more easily to reach out to people and talk to them one-on-one with random people when everybody's a stranger is tough. One-on-ones, once you know some people and you realize, hey, this group seems okay, is a lot easier. And as a manager, you can facilitate that. As a colleague, you can facilitate that as well for someone who's new.
Okay, so this might be a personality change or difference. Personally, I prefer the one-on-one coffee talks because it's more real. I find people will automatically put on their mask and be a little more performative if it's a group setting. So yeah, you put on the slides, but like, of course people are going to talk about their dog and I love my kids and, oh, isn't this great? We took this vacation. Like, I'm a well-balanced person. It's like, no, you're not. You're sending emails at 11:30 at night, So like, yeah, I mean, they're great. They're part of the performing aspect of work.
Yeah. Fair point. I mean, it depends on the group a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have this laid back kind of happy hour-ish group, that works well. But you're right. If it's some formalized BS, that's going to fall flat. Like, that doesn't help.
Mhm.
I think the layer that Alex tossed in there too is, hey, remember that people are people, and some people, Dave and myself definitely fall in this camp, as you might have picked up, are like, yeah, just give me the list. I'll reach out to everybody. It'll be great. Like, let's just go get coffee, and I'll just be the new person. And Alex, to your point, like, that's not the case for other people. And in particular, like, our focus here is, let's talk about the group of people who are absolutely new to this completely. They don't have previous experience, or it's very minimal. What does that look like? And you might not even know what to ask at a coffee chat. Like, what do you ask? Like,
how do you kick that off? How do you start that?
Pro tip, like, who are you and what's your background? Tell me how you got to where you are. Like, that's a good starter. Sorry, Alex, go.
Exactly. Have them talk about themselves, like you're saying. People can easily fill time with that, and they can kick things off that way.
One of my favorite things, like if it's going well, and you can tell that you guys are vibing or on a similar wavelength, I like to ask them, like, all right, so I know this is your job now, but what do you actually like to do? Because sometimes they're not the same thing, and then you really find out some stuff, and that's awesome. Like, they really like their role 2 roles ago, but this one, it pays the bills.
Yeah, another one I always use is culture questions. Like, what do you think this company's culture is like? Like, how would you describe it? Or like, how do things get done around here? Like, tell me those kind of things. And it's interesting because the more open-ended I think some of these kind of questions go, and more personalized, people start to finally open up, and they're not just reading off a resume. They're kind of just talking about, like, look, this part sucks. This part's good. This part sucks too. Right. And it's like, you get those kind of more real conversations at that point.
Well, and the other thing too is, my advice for that, if you set up a coffee talk and you're doing it in person, don't show up with your computer.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you're working on your iPad or something, because then all of a sudden it becomes like an interview, right? It's no longer, hey, I want to speak to you, one-on-one. It's help me get information that will help me. And that's just completely disingenuous. And that's not the message you want to send.
You mean like,
you've never come across these
during
people?
Your coffee chat? Is that what
you're
saying?
No, you should take notes, but like, there's a certain distance that's created when it's on, on a computer. It changes the vibe. Are you interested in the person? If so, do you really need to do that, or can you take some quick notes afterwards? This is sort of a different approach. I know for me, like, if I describe myself as new school values with old school lines in the sand, right? Which can be a weird mix. So like, if I'm presenting and half the room is on their laptops, you're wasting my time. Don't bother showing up to this meeting, because clearly you're not prioritizing what I have to say. And I didn't spend the last week putting together this deck to waste your time. So shut your laptop and pay attention. Right?
Do you know a little thing that, as you're describing that scenario and sort of the different dynamics there? So one is, if you're meeting in person for coffee, don't bring your laptop. Like that's I feel like that goes without saying, but let's just say it.
Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. I've experienced it.
The other thing that I was thinking about is when I have coffee chats with folks remotely, which I do a lot because I think that they are a valuable way of connecting, I literally have coffee in my hand. Yeah. In part because it sets the tone of, this is informal. I'm not leaning over. I'm not taking notes. Unless I say it specifically. I say, I'm just going to write that down quick. That was really cool. But otherwise, I have coffee in my hand because it helps create that sort of atmosphere. And I would hope that it helps sort of take down the formalness of the environment for the person I'm with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that I have noticed that is concerning is the amount of people who believe there is a correct answer for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I don't live in that world. There are multiple answers. There are multiple ways to get to the same destination. You just have to figure out your way of doing it, you know?
Dave, that's a really cool segue to another item that I did just jot in my notes over here.
Okay.
To your point, there's not always a correct answer. There might be multiple answers, but there are answers that exist and you can access them. So the note I wrote down is Google stuff. It's amazing how often I get asked questions by different team members who are somewhat new, who, for whatever reason, are not in the habit of first either Googling or asking ChatGPT or pick your favorite source of information. Right. But that's it's really good to ask questions, especially the open-ended ones to Alex's point, so you can get other people's perspectives and they can introduce you to ways of thinking or ideas you hadn't thought of yourself. But for some of the more tactical stuff, man, just Google it. You'll become more proficient very quickly than a lot of your peers by simply looking it up yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the big questions that I ask, especially in any new role, is, I mean, you can do this in the interview, you can do this after you get the job, tell me what the successful people in this role are doing. And then if they don't have an answer for that, if they do have an answer, then you go talk to that person who they cite, because there's something about that person, the way they handle their job, the way they communicate with other people, that is something that you should probably borrow. And when I did that, when I took my latest role, I immediately realized that there were a number of things that I just wasn't going to do it that way. And I said as much to set the expectations with my boss. It's like, look, you wanted me into this role. I'm happy to do this role, but I'm not doing it this way. I'm going to do it my way. And if that becomes an issue, we can talk about it. Otherwise, let me do this. Right. But that also comes after years of experience of managing expectations and doing the projects. And, it's really liberating once you can get to that spot. Like, I was in a training the other week, actually, and my boss was on the same training, and he said to me in my one-on-one, like, oh man, Dave's going to hate that, because it was very specific instructions on how to do a very particular thing on a project that hadn't even started yet. So I was like, this is a waste of 20 minutes because I'm not going to remember anything that you say to me because I haven't done it yet. And I won't know if this makes sense until I do it, in which case you're going to say, but I already told you the process. It's like, yeah, but you came up with the process without doing the work. So, I'm not going to commit to that. So that brings up some interesting dynamics, but maybe that's a Dave problem. I don't know. Could be. I'm open to that.
I've got one more, but I think Alex also has a couple more. So I'll just interject my little short one here, which there's probably some tie-in with Dave's experiences here as well, which is broad bucket, over communicate, just be present, your only way of being in front of people is through your communications in a remote environment, via email, via chat, via on video in a meeting, etc. That's the only way people see you, because they don't see you in the hall. You're not present to them unless you are quite literally in front of, at the top of their inbox or in their chat. Related to that, CC your manager on communications, especially if you're entry level and you're new and you're doing stuff. Just CC them. It's not a micromanaging thing. It's not a your boss is looking over your shoulder. It's, hey, they can help you throughout your various situations with folks. If there's a question that comes up that you don't know the answer to, you don't have to sort of awkwardly ask. You can say, hey, did you see that message? I don't know how to respond to this. Can you help me out? It helps your manager help you in their day-to-day, and it helps you helps your manager guide you through some of the day-to-day situations that you might not even realize are things you got to watch out for.
I like that one. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's also building trust, because you're just adding the amount of communication that you're doing with other people. Now you're doubling it by throwing your manager as well. So now you've got more communication with them as well. So that's good. I was thinking a couple things that can help, especially a messy entry. One is bottom up and top down. So what I mean by that is, commonly when someone has started, the manager or hiring people are thinking of specific tasks that they would like that person to eventually take on, or to take on quickly. Right. I think that's a tough way to start, because they're going to tell them how they have done it and how their perspective. But one of the better questions out of that, and either as that new employee or as that manager, be thinking about this or asking this of, this is what I hope to get out of this. So instead of saying this is a prescriptive mentality, like Dave being given a list, a process, that's not that helpful. It's a lot more helpful to say, this is the task that I need done. This is what I hope to get out of it.
Right.
I'm hoping to have you show me this or something like that at the end of it, because they're probably going to do it differently. And that's also that's okay. Right. And then from the top down perspective, the more kind of grounding, might just be a me thing, but the more I can understand the market, the environment, the larger company, the direction of things, it is really nice to be able to tie in what I'm doing, what I'm hearing with that, and say, okay, I feel like I have my feet underneath of me. I kind of get what people are talking about and kind of the why they're talking about things this way. Yeah. Or maybe I'm meeting a lot of really grumpy people. Well, that's because actually numbers have been really bad, and that means there's been a lot of pressure on a lot of people. It's not me and my interaction. Instead, it's what they're feeling from those outside influences as well, or something like that. I mean, whatever those kind of main things are. From a marketing standpoint, I always ask people, why? Like, why would a customer care about this? What triggers them? What pressures them? Is it competitors? Is it a situation? Is it regulation? Like, what's going on that causes this thing to happen? But that also is true across, why is this company here? What are we doing? Why do we sell this way? Why do we do things like that? And having those kind of nice open questions allows you to bridge a lot of that gap too, of like, oh, history-wise, this is what happened, and now you're here.
Right. I think there's some quick wins to be had too. Like if you reach out to teams that are always begging to be reached out to, legal, lawyers are friends, not enemies, even though their job is to say no to ideas. Reach out to legal, establish a relationship before you need something from them. And then I had an interaction the other day, actually, where I reached out to a team that I had never talked to before, but I had a prioritization question. And the guy came back and was just like, oh my God, thanks for including us in the prioritization process. Like, it's fantastic you reached out. It was just like so excited that I reached out before submitting anything. It's like, thank you for including us. I'm like, sure. Yeah, cool. I'm glad you're so happy. It's a really simple act, but now it's like, all right, cool. That I know that I can. That kind of response lets me know that I can reach out more and establish something more there, because clearly there's a desire, but people aren't taking advantage of that yet. So,
I think that context laying that Alex you talked about enables what you just talked about, Dave, which is if the people that we work with, and especially our new hires, have a good grounding in here's why the company does what it does. Here's what we do in support of that why, and here's specifically how we do it. And so you can sort of ladder it all up and understand the context of here's what our team does and how we do it, and here's how that relates to what other teams and how they do it. Then to your comments, Dave, you can make those connections because you have the underlying sort of here's why we're doing it and here's what we're doing. So you can say, okay, in order for us to be successful, we should engage these other guys too, which then helps folks who are totally new to the culture, the community, the networks start to piece together where there should be connections. Because oftentimes those are invisible. You don't even realize, hey, there's a legal team and here's what they might be responsible for, or how they play in. Or even like I remember coming to an organization, I didn't understand at all what the purpose of an HR rep for our organization was, like what their role was and how they could help me or support me. And even I'm just reminded of a time where we set up a call with them to say, hey, tell us more about what your role is and how we should think about engaging with you. And even simple things like that can be a cool way of doing an introduction, a coffee type thing, because especially those teams that you talk about, Dave, like legal and HR, compliance, regulatory, they want to be part of the picture, and so they're going to be all the more eager, and they might paint a picture that you would have never been able to piece together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny, like, we talk about I think that's a really good summary for people to go back to, and like what's possible for that, or what they should be going and doing. But the other thing with the personalities and the kind of go after it, get after it kind of thing, like that has put me in some interesting situations previously. Like when we met, for that organization, I took part of the new employee organization, right? They have, that would be the other thing. Look for those sorts of internal organizations or resource organizations, for new employees, working mothers, African-American network, or, whatever else exists. Those can be great resources to find out, across the organization, how things work, even in areas that aren't yours, but provide that bigger context. And I remember going to the new employee, it was sort of have some dinner with execs, and they did this kind of like speed dating talk with executives. And I called out the senior vice president of HR around like, hey, what you're doing with digital marketing doesn't make any sense. And I'm brand new. And if you actually want to get digital marketing talent, these are the organizational changes that have to be done. And I can get you a group of 10 people who will, back up my claims here. And then that was the thing that, they're like, all right, great, put it together. And I'm like, oh crap. Okay. So, so I got 8 to 10 people that, they paid for lunch. We gave them feedback, but I had to go to my boss and be like, hey, there's a number of us on your team that's going to speak to HR today, but it has nothing to do with you. And that was an interesting conversation. But it worked out. It worked well. But that's the kind of stuff where like I have found those sorts of uncomfortable things. Like if you find yourself really nervous after me telling that story, that might not be your approach. But I have found that by accidentally talking myself into situations where my back is against the wall forces me to break through that barrier of what might be uncomfortable with. And it usually leads to good things, because I'm not naturally extroverted, but I'm good for an opinion.
Dave, this brings up probably one of the most important things you can do as a new employee, and something for managers and team members to look out for opportunities, which is find a buddy. Find somebody else who is in your shoes as a new employee, It's okay if they're sort of established, but there's something about finding somebody or a group of people who are all in the same circumstance together, because it puts you in a case where you can say, hey, did you know about this? And they can say, no, but I learned this other thing. And that sort of joint learning and the ability to have sort of camaraderie and learn from each other is one of the most valuable assets you can have, because you might find a Dave who then you end up sitting in, executive leadership lunchroom having lunch with HR, because Dave took a very different approach than you might have in that circumstance. And that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I the other thing is, carve out time on your calendar to do the coffee talks, not just the new hire hit list kind of things, but like if you go to a presentation and somebody says something interesting, follow up after that and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about this. And people want to talk about what they're working on. And so I set aside Fridays to network with people, talk to people that I haven't talked to in a long time, and I just want to catch up with. Or, just try to keep that network going both inside the company and outside the company, because it's so easy to get caught up in the to-do list that you forget about the things that are actually important. Like I was talking with a friend of mine who works for a different huge company about that particular topic, about how to-do lists are traps. And they're great. You feel great accomplishing certain things, but don't lose sight of the other things, and where you're going. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that was a great discussion. I think I'm going to have to go back through and pick out all of the recommendations we had for that, and maybe put a summary on that. Because it's a good reminder, even for me. So yeah, anyway, thanks for making it this far in. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, share. If you know any, new graduate or new hire that might benefit from this, share this episode with them. And with that, we will see you in the next episode of Enterprising Minds 2 weeks from now. Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks.